While he's getting that all going, I got a little quiz for you all. Baseball Hall of Fame is where? We're on it. What about the pro football? Canton, Ohio. All right, you're doing pretty good. The lacrosse.
Bolton.
It's in Sparks, Maryland. All right. Well, every sport, it seems like, or any kind of entertainment has its Hall of Fame in which, they lift up the great of the great, and really we get to hear their stats and hear all their accomplishments. Well, tonight we get a walk through the famous Faithful Hall of Fame. We're going back to the old timers. We're going to hear some of their stats. We're talking about Moses, Isaac, his son, Jacob, Esau, Joseph, and even Moses himself. We're going to look at some of the big teams, the big leaguers, like the children of Israel that made their way through the Red Sea. And even Rahab the prostitute has a plaque on the wall there on the Hall of Fame, recounting her story of faith as she hid the spies in Jericho. And like any Hall of Fame, as you spend time there hearing about all the greats, you find yourself a little bit inspired, and you go back home thinking, I'm going to do, whatever sport that is, I'm going to try a little harder, and even as we hear the greats of faith, we're been inspired too, and it's not just a big league dream, it's like, we're just minor league here, right, we're nothing like them. And well, I'm here to tell you there are no minor leagues in the Hall of Fame, and that everybody's big league because everyone has received the same faith. You have been saved by faith. Ephesians 2. You too are the righteous who live by faith, just like the Hall of Famers. And when you really look at the lives of those who are listed, a lot of them were even worse sinners than the average person. And yet, there they are. And so, this is not just a casual walk through a museum on our way to the gift shop and on home with a drink in our hand. No, today is game day. We're suiting up. We're on the field, and here is the playbook. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame. He sat down at the right hand of the Father. Consider him who endured such opposition of sinners, that you may not grow weary and lose heart. Right there, that last bit is the game. It is the competition, that you and I not grow weary and lose heart. Now, the reason that I'm stressing this is because the opposition that we're playing against would have us believe that it's something different. You see, there is a trick play in the opposition, and many fall for it, and thinking that the game really is about faith itself, and that it's about having faith. And that's a problem, because even the Hall of Famers have doubts. What do you do with those doubts? Well, I know in a nice situation like this, you don't even think about it. You just kind of, it's not there. And when you're in a Bible study, you kind of just pretend and blend. If you had a real big question about some elemental key part of the faith, and I'm not so sure about that, and you're certainly not going to raise your hand in front of everybody and say, what about that? I don't know about that. I know some people do, but most of us aren't really that kind of person, okay? So what do you do with your doubts? Because you're not going to just join the other team, right? That's not where you're at, and yet you have real questions. And it's on a very serious note, if you don't know what to do with your doubts and the things you're just not so sure about in the faith, you're out of bounds. You're easy to pick off for the opposition, because that's what the whole weakness right there. If the whole game was about believing and you're not so sure you believe, you're tackled in all of that. So I want everybody to huddle up today. Okay, take a knee, because today's coaching is about faith and doubts and what do you do with them. And the first thing that you need to know is that every thinking person has doubts about the Christian faith. There's no way around it. Because every thinking person has those things that they see in the Bible, they experience in their lives, and they go, I don't know about that. You know, it's just like, how does that work? You know, I don't really know. If you don't have the training and the practices down to handle your doubts, you'll never have the resilience that it takes to get through life with its pain, its sorrow, and its grief. You'll never be able to really handle questions that don't have easy answers, or answers that will even be found during your lifetime. And so, we really need to have this nailed down of how to deal with doubts. And to know that there are many under this heading of I don't know. And under this list of I don't know, you need to know that it's okay to have doubts. And that it's part of the faith is to have these questions of I don't know. And the first one is, well, how? How does that work? See, it's okay to have that question when you look at, just the miracles of the Bible. Like, well, nothing like that's happening today. Like, it's a lot of that Old Testament stuff. It's like, whoa, how did that work? God stopped the sun from moving for a whole day, right? He made a shadow move back. How does that work? And it's not that you have to doubt that it happened. It's just, how did it work? And so one of the biggest topics in our society right now is whole creation evolution. You and I believe that God created everything. I do not question that God created the universe. But when you look at the universe that He created, it bears witness in itself as you observe it that it seems to be pretty old. I mean, like really old. I mean, like super old, okay? And that's what it's what it looks like. And yet, when you read in Genesis, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 6 days, well, how does it work together? How do those two go together? You have to be able to have an honest person's doubt and question about that as you put it together. Not that you're saying that it didn't happen. You just need to know, how does it all work? Well, as we go down the list, they're going to get harder. That was kind of the softball one, just to get you on the same page with me. The second one is why. When you're really going through life, it's never easy. You're going to face things that just are excruciatingly painful. And as you're facing them, and you hear how God is love, and He cares, and He's for you, not against you, there's now no condemnation, you're wondering then why are you experiencing these things? Now, I want you to think about someone, a child in junior high. And that child in junior high is asking God, why is my family breaking apart? Why are my parents divorcing? And that child really wants an answer, but being in junior high, what tools do they have? Think now about a husband and wife, a young couple, and they're in the quietness of their home, because a lot of this happens just in the home, they don't talk about it. But God, why did you allow us to have a miscarriage? As you deal with that pain, as you deal with that question, you're asking God, and you're wanting those answers, and you're hearing about how good He is, and yet... And then other people in the secrets of their hearts are wondering why the rest of the world looks so happy, and life goes so easy for them, and I feel in such darkness. And at times I want to hurt myself, and at times I even think about killing myself. God, why do I have to feel this way? What are you doing in all of this? Now you can see as this list goes down, there's less and less patience, less and less resources in a human being to really deal with it. And this next one's even more so. It's like, how long? Have you noticed that a lot of the stuff in life just goes on and on? A lot of our members have to deal with a very sick spouse or a parent for years. And the only release for all of it in the end is death. And you can see that's going to be a while. In fact, this was such a question for the psalmist that it keeps being repeated. Lord, how long is this going to last? And you can even ask this question with frustration and tears. You can even ask this question and it's still okay with anger in your voice, because that's exactly how Psalm 13 asks. How long, O Lord, have you forgotten me forever? That's in the Bible. How long, O Lord? Now, this last one on the list, you might think, well, that's kind of borderline. That could go either way, between appropriate, not appropriate. And I'll agree with you. But we're going to look at the appropriate one, not the inappropriate one. All right? So just hang with me. This last one is, don't you care? Yeah, even this doubt and question of God is still appropriate when it's asked of God, and you truly expect the answer to be that you do care for me. I just don't see it or feel it or experience it at the moment. Now, I want you to think then of a very familiar story, and one I really enjoy telling, and that's Jesus on the boat. And it's the big storm, and the boat's going down, and Jesus is sleeping. And you remember the question the disciples asked Jesus, right? Don't you care? We are drowning. Don't you care? Completely appropriate question to ask. Now, if you remember what Jesus did, of course, he stood up. His care of his friends was in question. Without even answering that, he stands up and he calms the sea and the wind and the waves. And then he says, where's your faith? Now, we tend to hear this as a scolding of his disciples, but I want to turn your attention to something different than a scolding, but a coaching. He has his disciples literally huddled around him, right? And here's a teachable moment. You see, the one thing you need to know about faith and doubts is that absolutely every person on the earth has the same amount of faith. Every human being has faith. There's nobody that's without faith. The question isn't whether you have faith or you don't have faith. The question is, where is it? Jesus was asking his disciples, is your faith in me, or is it in the physical laws of science, like gravity? Like things go down in the water, they go to the bottom. Is your faith in me, or is it in biology, like when lungs get wet with water, people drown? Is your faith in me, or is it in physical world that you observe, like the wind and the waves that are crashing? Now, it's obvious that most of us believe in science, biology, gravity, physics, right? Jesus was turning their attention to the one who made the physical world, the one who commands the world, so that their faith may be in its proper place in Jesus himself. And so what we learn then about faith is while it is okay to have doubts, and everybody has them, and it's okay to really question and be angry with God, you are never without faith. It turns toxic, though, when you go from not knowing to finally knowing. You see, I know God doesn't love me. I know that there is no God who created everything. I know there is nothing after all of this. You die, you're dead. That's when your doubts turn toxic. And your faith then is in something else. You still have faith. An atheist has just as much faith as a Christian. It's just in the physical world that it's observed. So how then do you get your faith put into the proper place? And that is not a mystery. Faith comes from hearing the message of Christ. For the disciples, they heard Jesus speak to the wind and waves, and the message was clear to them. He's in control. Their faith was put into the love of Jesus that was there, that he would do this for them, and in the power of Jesus that he can do this. As we hear the message of Christ, we hear his love for us, that he would go to the cross and the power of Jesus, that he has risen from the dead. So that all of the doubts that we have that, well, how does this work? How is God going to take care of me? I don't feel it. All of that is set into its proper place to know, yes, but you are with me. You love me. And you have the power to take care of me. Your cross and your resurrection have answered. And so, as we go through this life, you want to be as close to that message. You want to be in that message as much as you can. The reason we hold this once a week is so that you can be nurtured in that faith. The reason that you have a scripture somewhere on your iPad or your phone or like old-time Bible with pages on it, the reason you have that is so that you might be in a place where the Holy Spirit can take the message and strengthen that faith in all of your doubts that we all have. You see, if you're in this competition, the competition is that you not grow weary and lose heart, not lose faith. And you grow weary and you lose heart when your doubts turn toxic and you begin to know that God isn't for you or with you. But here's where he sets your heart right. Here is where he sets it right. So may the Lord, our God, the author, the pioneer, perfecter of our faith, bless and keep you in that faith. Amen.